All right, Python. It's everywhere these days, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, everywhere you look.
It really is.
From, like, your smart fridge
Oh,
to,
yeah.
like, all this AI stuff that's blowing up left and right. Python's kind of the engine under the hood, wouldn't you say? And if you're jumping into the coding world, which, I mean, you are, obviously you need the right tools, right? Like,
Right.
you got to have the right setup.
Absolutely.
That's what we're diving into today.
Yeah.
Python IDs. So we're looking at this World Insider article. It's called Top Python IDEs. Master Python like a pro.
Right.
It came up pretty recently, actually, September 19th. Did you get a chance to look at it?
I did. Yeah. It's a good one.
Yeah, it's super interesting. Okay, so for anyone listening who might not be familiar, can you give us a quick breakdown of what an IDE actually is?
Yeah, sure. An IDE, it's your command center for coding, basically. So instead of just, typing code into like a plain text editor, an IDE gives you all these extra tools and features
Oh, okay.
to make coding easier, faster, and honestly way more fun. Things like auto-completion, debugging tools, version control integration. It's all there to streamline your workflow and help you write better code.
It's like having a superpower, but for coding.
Exactly. And just like any superpower, you've got to choose the right tool for the job.
Right. Because they're not all created equal, are they?
No, not at all. And that's a big misconception I see, especially with folks who are new to coding. They think, oh, an IDE is an IDE, right? But that's like saying all cars are the same.
Huh. That's so true.
Right. You wouldn't take a minivan off-roading, would you?
Definitely not unless you wanted to get stuck.
Yeah, exactly. So just like you choose a car based on your needs, you got to choose an IDE based on what you're trying to accomplish with your coding.
That is such a good analogy.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's say you're a total beginner, just dipping your toes into the coding pool. You're probably not going to jump straight into a super complex, feature-rich IDE, right?
Probably not the best idea, no.
It can be totally overwhelming. The article actually talks about this and recommends Thonny for beginners.
Tawny's great. It's like that first car, maybe a hand-me-down, but it gets you where you need to go without a lot of bells and whistles.
Exactly. And one of the things I love about Thonny, and the article highlights this too, is that it comes with Python already bundled in. So you download Thonny, and boom, you're ready to code.
Hmm.
No messing around with separate installations or configurations.
It's all about removing those barriers to entry, which is so key for beginners.
Totally. And then on top of that, it has this really clean and simple interface, so you're not getting lost in a maze of menus and options.
Exactly. It's all about focusing on the code itself.
And speaking of focusing on the code, can we talk about Thonny's step-through debugger for a second?
Oh, it's fantastic.
Because I remember when I first started coding, that was like a game changer for me.
Oh, I bet. It's so helpful, especially when you're starting out.
Yeah, because you can see your code execute line by line and see what's actually happening.
It's like having X-ray vision into your code. You can see exactly what each line is doing, which is huge for understanding how code actually works.
It's such a valuable tool, and Thonny makes it so accessible, even for total newbies. Okay, so we've covered the beginner-friendly option, but what about those who are ready to level up their coding game? What if they're ready to trade in that hand-me-down for something a little more, shall we say, high performance?
Yeah, if you're ready to hit the coding fast lane.
Yes. Then we need to talk about PyCharm.
Oh, yeah, PyCharm. It's like the Ferrari of Python IDEs.
It really is. And I think it's safe to say PyCharm is kind of the rock star in the Python world, would you say?
Absolutely. It's developed by a company called JetBrains, and they're known for creating really powerful, really sophisticated developable tools.
Yeah, and you can definitely tell. PyCharm has this reputation for being incredibly powerful, but it can also seem a bit intimidating at first, especially if you're coming from a more basic editor.
I can definitely see that. It's feature-rich for sure.
Right, feature-rich is a good way to put it.
But once you get the hang of it, you realize why so many professional developers swear by PyCharm.
It's all about that intelligent code completion, right? Like, it's almost as if PyCharm can read your mind and knows what you're trying to code before you even type it out fully.
Yeah, it's insane. It'll suggest code snippets, variable names, function calls, all based on the context of what you're working on.
It's a huge time saver
Yeah,
and a major productivity booster.
absolutely.
And we can't forget about PyCharm's awesome support for web development and data science.
Oh, right. Yeah, it's not just a one-trick pony.
No, not at all. It's got these specialized tools and integrations that make it super versatile no matter what kind of Python project you're working on.
Like imagine you're building a website, right?
Okay, yeah.
PyCharm has built-in support for things like JavaScript, CSS, HTML, all the front-end stuff. So you're not jumping between different editors or anything like that.
It's all right there in one place.
Exactly.
Okay, so PyCharm sounds pretty amazing. But it's important to point out that it is a premium IDE. There is a price tag that comes with all those bells and whistles.
Right. So what about those folks who are looking for something powerful, but maybe not ready to commit to a paid option just yet?
Yeah, that's a really good point. The article actually mentions a couple of other IDEs that are known for their customization options. We're talking VS Code and Sublime Text.
Yeah.
Have you had a chance to play around with either of those?
Oh, yeah, definitely. They're both incredibly popular and for good reason.
What makes them stand out? Because they're not Python specific, right?
No, they're more like customizable toolkits, if you will.
Ooh, customizable toolkits. I like the sound of that.
Yeah. So they might not come preloaded with all the Python-specific features you'd find in something like Thonny or PyCharm right out of the box, but
Yeah.
they've got this incredible ecosystem of extensions and plugins.
Okay, so it's like you start with this base platform,
Mhm.
which is already pretty powerful on its own,
Right, exactly.
but then you can customize it to your heart's content with these extensions, like adding on superpowers as you need them.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it. So if you're really into web development, you can find extensions for specific frameworks like Django or Flask.
Oh, I see.
Or if data science is your jam, there are tons of extensions for data visualization, machine learning, all that good stuff.
So you can basically build your own custom Python IDE without having to, like, build it from scratch.
Precisely. It's all about finding the tools that fit your workflow, you know? And the cool thing about VS Code and Sublime Text is that they're so widely used, there's a huge community creating and supporting these extensions.
So you're never going to be, like, stuck trying to figure something out on your own.
Exactly. There's always someone out there who's probably already solved the problem you're facing, and they've probably created an extension for it.
That's amazing. I love that. Okay, so we've got Thonny for beginners, PyCharm for the pros, VS Code and Sublime Text for the customization enthusiasts. But before we move on, I want to circle back to something else the article mentioned: open source IDEs, specifically Eric, Paizo, and Spider.
Yeah, definitely worth talking about those. They're all great options, especially for those who are big on open source software or maybe working with a tighter budget.
Right, because they're all free to use, which is awesome.
Absolutely. And they're not just like free and basic either. They each have their own strengths and unique features.
Oh, interesting. So it's not just a matter of picking any open source IDE and calling it a day.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
It's still important to think about your specific needs and what you're hoping to accomplish with your coding.
Right, because like you were saying earlier, it's all about finding the right tool for the job.
Exactly. So, for example, the article mentions that Eric is a really good choice for folks interested in GUI development, creating those graphical user interfaces for your applications.
Okay, so if you're dreaming of building like the next killer app with a beautiful interface.
Eric might be your new best friend.
Exactly. And what about Paizo? What makes it stand out?
Paizo is really interesting because it's got this strong focus on interactive computing. So if you're doing a lot of data exploration, scientific computing, that kind of thing, Paizo can be a really great environment for that.
Interesting. It's like a digital lab notebook where you can experiment with code and data in real time.
Exactly. It's got this really nice workflow for that kind of iterative exploratory coding.
That's cool. And then there's Spider, which I know is another popular open source IDE.
Spider is kind of the go-to choice for a lot of data scientists.
So I've heard.
It's got all these built-in tools for data analysis, visualization, debugging, and it integrates really well with scientific libraries like NumPy, SciPy, and Pandas.
So it's like having a Swiss Army knife specifically designed for data science.
Pretty much. And the best part is, just like all the other open source IDEs we've talked about, it's completely free to use.
Amazing. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, Thonny. PyCharm, VS Code, Sublime Text, Eric, Paizo, Spider. That's a pretty impressive lineup. But with all these choices, how does someone actually decide? I mean, is there a right or wrong answer here?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And honestly, there's no magic formula. But there is one crucial piece of advice that I think often gets overlooked.
Oh, I'm intrigued. Tell me everything. So spill the beans. What's the crucial advice for choosing an IDE that most people miss?
It's really simple, actually, but so many people don't do it. Try before you buy.
Oh, okay. You mean like taking advantage of those free trials the article mentioned?
Exactly. Think of it like test driving a car before you commit.
Right. You wouldn't buy a car without taking it for a spin first, would you?
Exactly. You want to get a feel for how it handles, check out the features, make sure it's the right fit for you.
And it's the same thing with IDEs. Download a few that sound interesting, both free and paid, and spend some time with each one.
It's the only way to know for sure which IDE is going to make your coding life easier and more enjoyable.
Totally. It's so easy to get caught up in the excitement of a new tool, but taking the time to test drive is crucial.
Absolutely. And that brings us back to the main point. There's no one-size-fits-all when it comes to Python IDEs.
Right. Just like with those cars we were talking about earlier.
Exactly. The best IDE depends on your coding style, your project goals, even your personal preferences.
And we've explored a whole spectrum of options today, from beginner-friendly Thonny to the powerhouse PyCharm and those awesome customizable toolkits like VS Code and Sublime Text.
And let's not forget those open source gems, Eric, Paizo, Spider. They're all out there waiting to be explored.
So many choices.
Yeah,
But I think that's a good thing, right?
yeah,
It means there's a perfect IDE out there for everyone.
absolutely. And the journey to finding it is half the fun.
It's all part of the adventure.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, we're just about out of time for this deep dive. But before we go, any final words of wisdom for our listeners who are ready to conquer the world of Python?
Don't be afraid to experiment. Try different IDEs, customize your setup, find what works best for you. The more you explore, the more you'll discover about yourself as a coder.
Love that. Embrace the journey, experiment, and find that IDE that helps you unleash your coding superpowers. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Python IDEs. Until next time, happy coding.